Kaifa nadam al-ma, al-Quran. These words of al-Ghazali are clear enough. There is no need to elaborate. The Quranic verses that have just been presented also have clear indications that these ummas from the direction of their disappearance or existence are determined by the rabbinic constitution, which is fixed, will not be replaced, and will not be changed while there is heaven and earth. Although Westerners are more precise than us in discovering and uncovering the natural constitution and utilizing it in life, when they observe the visible signs of Allah's power in this universe, we are superior to them in uncovering the celestial constitution in the case of the battle of truth with falsehood. Through our contemplation of the readable verses of Allah and the facts that prove the truth of this constitution. This is a great matter that we have neglected. There is not enough space to discuss it here, even as an appendix. It is a subject that would require volumes of books to cover. That is why I have limited myself here to a number of indications that I will summarize in order to reach a conclusion that can be taken as indicative of the astonishing natural events that have befallen our globe. A. The Sunnah of the destructive Rabbani. In the course of my study of the Quran and al-Hadith, which contain indications of relevance to the realities we live in today, I have found that most of these sunnahs have already become a reality in the world, and have even come to the conclusion that the Rabbani punishment is imminent, corresponding to the evil deeds that must be avenged, and the character of the evil, the culmination of the evil that causes the destruction of the Ummah. Perhaps the most important of the destructive rabbinic sunnahs that have been mentioned in the Quran is tyranny. We can see this injustice in our time in its most vulgar form, and in its fullest picture, whether it is disbelief itself, or social injustice, or economic injustice, or injustice against the ulula of the earth by stirring up shubhat around them and spreading lust seduction with the world among them. Torturing, denying, blocking economically, socially, and psychologically, or by treason and stalking them. One of these destructive sunnahs behaviors that destroy is arrogance, and arrogance on earth, emulating the behavior of the people of Ad and Pharaoh. A glimpse of the behavior that was the main cause of the destruction of these two peoples has manifested itself in our own time. There are people who see their own barbaric actions that indirectly contain a message, liznal hal, who is stronger than us. There are those who see the ulula on this earth as a helpless minority, shurjamadan kalalan. There are also those who sent to various cities, and even to various countries, to mobilize all their forces and troops in order to launch a deception against Islam and its adherents. There are also those who see the need to mobilize all the forces to create all the negative effects against all those who remain steadfast in their din. So he parrots the words of Pharaoh, who said, "I will kill all their sons, and I will let their daughters live. And indeed, we are above them, and are able to force them." Another destructive sunnah behavior that destroys is treason against ulula, by committing an evil conspiracy against them. This is very clear in our time. Their continuous plotting is capable of destroying many people, and can even be said to have succeeded in displacing and obliterating mountains. Whether it is plotting against the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet al-Hadith, the schools of the Quran, the Manhaj Din al-Islam, which is trying to be practiced, even though it still contains many weaknesses in its application. The teaching of Islam and its basic rules by involving a woman who is chaste, deceiving her and the essence of her thinking, and then spreading poisonous ideas into her mind under the guise of women's freedom or the fulfillment of her rights. Another destructive behavior is to encourage those who live luxuriously on earth to commit destruction with a sin that warrants punishment. This can be observed in our own times, when the haves are seduced and directed to take part in destruction through cyberspace or limited internet sites, fun entertainment venues, fashion shows, and so on. The next human-destroying behavior is to adorn the world, which results in the child of man's overconfidence in himself and the power of Satan's incitement against him, so that he believes he can do everything. Furthermore, he feels that he is able to control the elements of nature around him at will. and he even feels that he is able to determine the fate of the fetus before it comes out of its stomach, as well as the plants before they emerge from the ground. Another destructive behavior is the spreading of immorality and vice across the earth, to the extent that society has no power at all to stem its spread. Also, the tremendous and relentless utilization of television programs, satellite broadcasts, and the internet as presented in full in our time. Another action that has also devastated humanity is the opening of the door to conflict between truth versus falsehood. This can also be observed. While the only target on earth is every Muslim, his religion and his book, even the rulers and kings of the earth gradually forgot their disputes and agreed to wage a war for the first time on the whole earth in total. B. The threats leading up to annihilation. These are some of the Sunnah's habits behaviors that lead to destruction. There are many Quranic verses that point to this. It is evident that the destruction of modern societies always begins with mild rabbinic threats as a prelude to the painful punishment, a sign that indicates the imminence of the punishment. It is well known that the actual punishment is always preceded by rabbinic threats, which are part of Allah's gentleness and mercy. This is the hint that Allah, the Almighty, gives in Surah An-Nahl when He says, "Or Allah may punish them gradually until they perish. Then surely your Rabb is the most merciful, and Nabal." L16 L47. This verse contains an amazing hint, namely, the omniscience of Allah, the Almighty, which stipulates that sometimes He tortures the great power of disbelief gradually. And what is meant by takawuf gradually is to weaken its capabilities gradually, whether from an economic direction in general, or from a military direction, or from a psychological direction. This is done by authorizing the army of Allah over them, the existence of which no one knows except Him. We can see evidence of this threat in the form of a gradual reduction in power today. In order to make it clearer and more complete, I will give a Quranic example that shows this, which is what happened to a great power in the past. None other than the state of Pharaoh, to whom Allah, the Almighty, sent some verses as a threat before the complete destruction of punishment. Allah says, "So we sent them floods, locusts, lice, frogs, and blood, as clear evidence, but they remained arrogant, and they were a sinful people." Al-Araf 133. These disasters and plagues were used as a preliminary punishment against the people of Pharaoh, as well as a threat to them. Various threats and disasters and plagues like this can be seen with the naked eye that, without needing to concentrate, can also be seen afflicting the superpowers and their allies from among the disbelieving or unjust countries. Hurricanes that hit repeatedly and heat waves, deadly diseases that affect plants, animals, birds, and humans. The whole world is still dealing with AIDS, the most frightening disease for which no cure has been found. The West has mad cow disease, while the East has avian influenza. The three diseases that afflict humans, birds, and animals are truly signs of this. We are now living in the age of knowledge, the age of man's blind confidence in his abilities. Despite this, deadly diseases still arise that man is completely helpless to overcome, unable to understand their secrets. And even the international community is burdened with great difficulties because of them. This is the meaning of Allah's words: He will torment them gradually. This situation prompts the question, can these diseases affect a large, oppressive country? Why has there not been a great torment that has prevented them from disbelief and misguidance? In answer to this question, say, how much influence do lice have on a superpower like the state of Pharaoh? However, the Quran considers it as one of the many preliminary disasters that result in the reduction of the pleasure of life of the wrongdoers and at the same time a threat to them. This is a Rabbani sunnah that always appears before the torment. The wisdom to be gleaned from this is that the character of the rabbinic punishment is total, devastating, painful, and beyond reasonable limits. Hence, it is always preceded by some signs of threat, which are part of Allah's gentleness and mercy, as clearly stated by a verse from Surah An-Nahl. Hence, The devastating storms had a significant effect on the economic side of the major countries and undermined the standard of prosperity they used to enjoy. Likewise, mad cow, AIDS, and a host of other diseases have a hand in attacking them. If these threats have not been able to touch their hearts, and they continue to increase in ignorance and stupidity, then, at that time, the level of threat rises to the highest level, namely the infliction of a killer wave that is characterized by its targets from among those who compete in luxury on Earth. In an instant, the ocean swallowed some 500,000 people in recreational areas and luxury resorts along the coast of Southeast Asia. The wisdom of the disaster is for them to come back and realize that there is an ultimate power that governs the entire universe. Only in his hands are the keys to everything. If the disaster does not hit the target, make them realize, then at that time it is justified in their midst to apply the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have not wronged them, but they have wronged themselves. They became the closest creatures to the power of the great Rabbani, who was wrathful towards them. And one of the wisdom of Allah is that the power of the tormentor will come when those to whom it is directed are happy, confident, and harassing the warriors of truth, and when they feel they have absolute power and feel secure. See directions for thinking about the indications of rabbinic sunnahs and their relevance to natural events. However, I am well aware that this indication is essentially difficult to find in relation to the secrets of the Rabbani Sunnah in managing the struggle between truth versus falsehood. This indication, as I mentioned, would require volumes of books to reveal and explain. Hence I am opening this forum of discussion to my dear readers to ponder on the verses that describe this sunnah custom and compare them with the reality of today in order to know what era we are living in. Every reader should know that these verses of Allah are clear and lucid, but it is necessary to do a research study accompanied by contemplation, so that those who understand will be able to recognize the character of this era, and then describe the types of torment that have befallen the earth. This indication, in my opinion, although difficult to comprehend, is the strongest indication of the natural events that will befall our globe as a whole. And this is most evident in the following components. 1. These years of destruction have already begun to materialize in our time, albeit in a very obvious form, but often the majority of people fail to take notice. 2. The perpetrators of falsehood in all parts of the world are gradually engaging in a struggle with the Muslims, or specifically with the teachings of Islam. This is a strange matter, and at the same time, it contains an amazing sign. 3. The only neck-breaking oppression in our entire world is being perpetrated against Muslims. 4. Most of the congresses and conspiracies on earth are for the purpose of deceiving the followers of Islam and their religion. 5. The world as a whole has agreed and aligned to commit the crime of expulsion, murder, and oppression of the Muslims. 6. People who live in luxury have also entered the racetrack of ugliness, with all its wide doors to broadcast abominations and evil throughout the earth, and their efforts continue to intensify. 7. The sphere of the earth today is different from the past, because in the past the settlement conditions were more environmentally friendly, natural villages. Now, however, it resembles narrow plots of land, overcrowded with people. Diseases of the heart and spirit spread quickly and evenly throughout the region. The threat of destruction and its partial signs have already hit the globe as a whole with different percentages of destruction, which inspires the conclusion that punishment and its comprehensive scope are imminent. Conclusion: observing the state of the earth as a whole, it has become one block containing various sins that are similar to each other, which are waging one plot, one war, one goal, and a similar threat. This similarity in global immorality is the first time it has occurred on the entire face of the earth, which naturally leads to the conclusion that the punishment that will be inflicted will take the form of one disaster for the whole of it, but with different levels of destruction. This torment will be a means of resting and breathing freely for the religion of Islam to rise towards the internationalization of Islam too. The example of the time of Noah alayhi salam at the beginning of human history proves that when the wars on earth at that time had become one, that is, all of them were to attack Islam, then the matter would be subjected to total torment with the infliction of a flash flood. At the end of human history, that is in our time, all the wars that exist throughout the earth have become one, that is directed against the fighters of the message on earth. Then this affair will be based on a punishment similar to the flash flood that befell the people of Noah, but in another form. Namely, the emergence of ad-Dukhan fog, to end the obsolete pages of human society, and at the same time open a new page to prepare for Alamiyatul Islam, internationalization of Islam too. And not necessarily Islam will return to glory after that.